Hey guys, it's Friday and that means it's time for another deck. This week I'm going to be doing the same thing I did last week, and that's testing a deck list in a live environment. Basically, since I started the channel, I haven't done a whole lot of playing this game outside of recording for it. You know, especially since I moved to Xbox One. Back when I had a 360, I had one upstairs and downstairs. The upstairs one was primarily for Netflix for the kids, but I used to jam some games on it, you know, when they were in the bath or something. So that's off the table now since my Xbox One is downstairs. So now, for the remainder of this game, probably, I'm either going to be, you know, picking builds from my friends or just jamming a list together and modifying it and changing it over the course of the week. So this is a theory craft. I've played around with the archetype a little bit, but, you know, I haven't found anything that I like, so I kind of went back to the drawing board, so to speak, and this is where I ended up. So the reason that I'm going to be playing Esper, honestly, the reason to play black in the artifact deck is this little guy. So it's 2 mana, 0/1 flyer, but whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Glaze Fiend gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So he gets really big if you're able to cast a sufficient amount of well, not necessarily cast, get a sufficient amount of artifacts to enter the battlefield, and he hits really hard in the air. So that's the reason that I want to play black, and it's the reason I'm playing the deck in the configuration that I am. So, you know, back to that point though, since this is a theoretical deck list, it may change over the course of the week, and if you have any suggestions, then lay them on me. Alright, so let's start talking more in depth about the cards. So that's Glaze Fiend. The other 2 mana card that I'm excited to be playing with is Mirrorsmith. Now, she's not an artifact herself, one of the few cards in this deck that, you know, besides land, that aren't artifacts. She's a 2 mana 2/1, and whenever you cast an artifact spell, you can pay 1 colorless mana, and if you do, you get a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token. So that token will trigger the Glaze Fiend, because all it needs is an artifact to enter the battlefield under your control. So you cast an artifact, you pay an additional 1 mana, you generate a token, and all of a sudden this guy's a 4/5 flyer. So that's pretty good. You know, obviously you got to have both of them on the field at the same time. But it's a little bit of synergy there that I really like. And the third piece of the synergistic puzzle is this guy. So we have 4 copies of Ethereum Sculptor. He's 2 mana 1/2. Artifact spells you cast cost 1 colorless mana less to cast. So since we're going to be jamming the deck full of artifacts, I think my list has 30 artifacts. You know, he does a lot of work in just reducing the mana cost, and then you can sink that mana into paying for Mirrorsmith triggers. So if you would cast a Courier's Capsule, you get a 1 mana discount with a Sculptor in play, and you can use that discount to pay for a token. So that's really the core synergies of the build. So Ethereum Sculptor with Mirrorsmith is really good because it lets you pay for the triggers. Ethereum Sculptor with Glaze Fiend is really good because it lets you cast cheap artifacts and get multiple triggers that way. But also Glaze Fiend is good with Mirrorsmith because you get to, you know, pay the 1 and get extra artifacts into play and get the triggers. So those are the three, you know, what we'll say the 3 linchpins of the deck, and they're all 2-drops. So now I'll just show you the rest of the 2-drops, talk about them a little bit. So we've got the Courier's Capsule here. It's 2 mana artifact, so of course it triggers all the things that we want to. And it lets us draw cards. You know, we sacrifice it, we draw 2 cards. So that's our card draw engine, and we're able to bring that back from the graveyard. We'll get to that a bit later. So other 2 mana card we're playing here is the Tide Hollow Strix. It's a 2 mana 2/1 flying Death Touch, which is amazing. So this deck is pretty much all about evasion, kind of wants to be the beatdown most of the time. Most of the best creatures in the deck have flying, and we can swing over other armies and race them. So, and the Death Touch is good on defense. If your opponent has something really big and scary, you can just hold this guy back and threaten to block and kill it. Plus, again, we've got ways to bring artifacts back out of the graveyard. So he's a pretty good guy here. The only, you know, downside on him, he isn't eligible for the cost reduction on from Ethereum Sculptor because he doesn't have any colorless mana in his mana cost. So he'll always be a 2 mana card, unfortunately, but that's all you can do. Alright, we're going to go to the 3 mana cards. I'm going to skip the 1 mana cards because I want to talk about that after I've talked about the deck list. So this guy is one of the newer cards. He's fucking amazing. He is a 3 mana Star where his power and toughness are each equal to the number of artifacts you control, and other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. And honestly, Master of Ethereum is going to go in any artifact deck list, but it's kind of the reason I wanted to dick around with Mirrorsmith, because she lets you create more artifact tokens that all become 2/2s with a Master in play. And also, you know, you can, if you get enough tokens, Master can easily be a 10/10 or whatnot, a really huge creature. So I think the 2 of those synergize very well. There's only 2 Masters in the deck because he's rare, but you know, that's why I kind of wanted to dick around with the Mirrorsmith and all that sort of stuff. So now let's take a look at Esper. It's a 3 mana 4/3 flyer, undercosted, you know, but it has a little bit of a drawback. Beginning of your upkeep, return an artifact you control to its owner's hand. So This can be as much of a liability as it can be an upside. You know, we've got some ETB triggers in the deck, not very many. You know, bouncing artifacts lets you re-trigger your Glaze Fiends. It lets you re-trigger your the white card, Mirror Smiths, without, you know, even if you have no cards in hand. Esper's will let you pick an artifact up and re-trigger these guys. So it is good, you know, at times to have one. But I would never, ever, ever want to see more than one, because then you got two of these triggers going on. So, you know, since I never want to see more than one, and it's not an integral component of the deck, then I'm just going to play one. You know, if we draw it and we get the engine going and get a 4/3 flyer out of it, you know, that's the best of kind. But if we don't, well, it's not a critical component of the deck. So moving on, do we have any more 3-mana cards? No, we do not. Looking at the 4 spot, we have Sanctum Gargoyle. Keep in mind now when I talk about mana costs, I mean, the Ethereum Sculptor here lets us play a lot of, if we hit this on turn 2, we can play a lot of our 4-drops on the 3rd turn. Sanctum Gargoyle is not a card we want to play on the 3rd turn, because it has an ETB that lets us bring back artifact cards from our graveyard to our hand. So, I mean, the big target here is Courier's Capsule. You know, you crack it, you draw 2 cards, and then later on in the game, you Sanctum Gargoyle, get it back in your hand, and you crack it and draw 2 more. Also, Master of Ethereum is so powerful. I mean, your opponent is going to have removal for this guy. So, I mean, Sanctum Gargoyle lets you go get it back. You know, you might lose your, well, she can't, you know, can't get a Mirror Smith back, unfortunately. If you lose your Mirror Smith, it's gone. Could lose a Glaze Fiend. You know, you might block something with a Tide Hollow Strix because Death Touch. Gargoyle, you know, it draws you a card, essentially. You know, whatever card you want out of your graveyard, you get to go get it back. So, you know, he's really good here. And like I said about Esper, if you do have the 2 of those and a Courier's Capsule in the graveyard, you can just keep looping card draw and draw a lot of cards. You know, you bounce the Gargoyle, recast it, get your Capsule. It costs a lot of mana, but, you know, Ethereum Sculptor's here to ease that a little bit. So another 4-mana card we're playing is Biden of Thassa. Just playing 1 because it's legendary, but it is good in this deck for a couple of reasons. We're playing a lot of flyers, so we can obviously trigger this thing and draw a lot of cards. But we also have Death Touch creatures and some pretty big Masters of Ethereum sometimes. And sometimes we even have, you know, 4 or 5 little tokens. This will let, you know, force a creature to attack, and we can swarm block to kill some stuff. So, I mean, or even just, you know, force your opponent to attack to pave the way for an Alpha Strike. I mean, the card has a lot of uses, but, you know, there's limited room in the deck, you know, for what I want to do at this point in the curve. So since it's a legendary card, I've just decided to go with 1 copy. We'll see how that plays out. Tower Gargoyle is a card I'm excited to play. It's just a straight up 4/4 flyer for 4 mana. Mana cost is a bit harsh, you know, requiring all the different colored sources that we have. So, I mean, we can get an Ethereum Sculptor on turn 2 and this guy on turn 3, but that's going to be, given the mana base, that's going to be a little bit of a Christmas land. But still, a 4/4 flyer in this meta is pretty huge. So, you know, especially at the 4 mana and potentially, you know, 3 mana. Even if we don't cast it until turn 5 or 6, we can still cast this thing for only 3 mana. So it's still a card that I'm excited to play with. So that's the 4-mana spot. We don't have anything at 5. On 6 we have Sharding Sphinx. I'm not sure this is entirely necessary, because if we've got enough artifacts to trigger this thing, we're probably doing pretty well. But, you know, the new token, we can trade up our, I keep forgetting that card's name, Mirror Smith tokens for flying tokens. You know, if we swing with, well, we'd have to sacrifice them. But, you know, I just like the card. It's 4/4 flyer, potentially for 5 mana. I mean, if we have multiple Ethereum Sculptors, I guess it can cost less than that, but I'm not banking on having multiples of that thing in play. But still, it can take over and swarm a board pretty quickly, and, you know, if you have Master of Ethereum in play to buff all those tokens, and just, it can get out of hand. I'm not sure how it's going to play out. We'll find out. And the last card, no, well, not the last card. We got to go back to 1 mana, but the last card at the top of the curve is Obelisk of Alara. You know, it's an artifact that pretty much does it all. I've seen this card in a lot of my decks, so you know, you should pretty much know what it does. It gains life. It lets you do some card selection. It's removal. It's burn. It's creature buff. You know, it's and all the emotes only cost 2 mana, so it's pretty good. And you know, we can cast it on the cheap with the mana discounts in this deck. So I think that it's worth it to play 1 copy in here. Might be wrong. Like I said, we'll find out over the course of the week what cards are studs and what cards are duds. But anyway, yeah, so pretty much everything so far besides Mirror Smith has been an artifact that I've shown you. I just basically jammed 30 artifacts in the deck. Let's just do a count here. That's 7, 8, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 22, and 8. Yeah, that's 30 artifacts. That's a lot of artifacts. So I'm playing 3 Mirror Smith in the non-artifact slots, and I'm playing 4 copies of Cloud Shift. Now, this deck only has so much room for non-creature spells, like I said. Thought about removal. You know, I did try Ulcerate in this, but since, you know, the deck that I was playing at that time was a bit of a lower curve, kind of wanted to rush the opponent down. But this deck rarely ever blocks, or, you know, not this deck, but the version that I was playing, rarely ever blocks, and ulcerate to 3 life was a lot. It honestly was a lot to have to pay. Thought about God's Willing as protection against creature removal. So if they aim, a shock at your Mirror Smith, you just give it pro red. Cloud Shift does the same thing, but not. So I mean, God's Willing is going to scry your card, which scry is huge. I mean, I'm not going to, talk about scry and say it's not very good. Also, God's Willing can double as an unblockable effect. So I mean, if you have Master of Ethereum out and your opponent only has a bunch, you're facing down a spider army, you can just give it pro green and smack him in the face. God's Willing can do that. So I mean, God's Willing is definitely a card that's very, very close to being in this deck list. But I decided to go with the Cloud Shift. So it does the same thing as God's Willing in that if your opponent points a removal spell at a key creature, you just pay 1 white mana and save it. But what Cloud Shift lets you do is blink it. Since all the creatures in this deck, besides Mirror Smith of course, are artifacts, when you blink them, you get to re-trigger your Mirror Smith, you get to re-trigger your Glaze Fiend, and this, currently right now, that's the only way to trigger a Glaze Fiend on your opponent's turn in this deck list is to Cloud Shift an artifact and buff up. So you can pull a lot of cool tricks where, I mean, you could have a Mirror Smith in play and some open mana with a Glaze Fiend that's not attacking for whatever reason because, you're setting up a trap or because you just didn't show your opponent a trigger. Then your opponent attacks. If you Cloud Shift the Glaze Fiend, or I'm sorry, let's say you Cloud Shift the 3rd artifact because we want to keep Glaze Fiend triggering here. I'm just trying to think over the scenario in my mind. Anyway, I don't know. Let's blink Tide Holostrix. Okay, yeah, that's good. Let's blink a Tide Holostrix with Cloud Shift, trigger the Glaze Fiend, and then trigger the Mirror Smith, pay the 1 mana, and trigger the Glaze Fiend again. And all of a sudden we've got a 4/5 flyer, and we've got a 2/1 Death Touching flyer, untapped and ready to block. So it's I think it's got a lot of upside. God's Willing could be the better card. I'm not sure. And again, I'm playing 4 copies of this because I want to test it out. It's possible that 3/2 is the right number. I'm not sure how many slots to really devote to this effect. But since I'm testing, I'm just going to start off with the max and see if we, just draw too many or if they're just sitting there as dead cards. Start out the max and we'll start cutting them if they start not being as useful or necessary as we think. But I mean, Cloud Shift can also blink a Sanctum Gargoyle to reuse the ETB. I mean, there's that said. You can, like I said, save any creature from removal. You can, untap your Sharding Sphinx to block with it. Untap your Tower Gargoyle to block with it. Those creatures are big. Untap your Tide Holostrix, obviously, and pretty much kill anything without first strike. So yeah, that's the deck list. Like I said, I have not played any games with this particular list. Probably played 10 games with another version that I tweaked and changed a little bit. Looking at the mana base, I've got 3 Arcane Sanctums, obviously. Let's talk about the colors, though. I mean, most of the spells in the deck are blue, 21 of them. So that's where where most of the deck lies, and most of the spells that are black, with the exception of Glaze Fiend, the black spells are blue as well. So I mean, pretty much every card in here needs blue mana. So I went pretty heavy on it. I don't want to get bottlenecked on blue and not be able to cast my stuff. So obviously we're playing 3 Sanctums. I'm playing, since I want to play a lot of basic islands, I played 3 Sandstep Citadels, which is essentially 3 Orzhov Guildgates, but I added the green mana to take use of Obelisk's green mode. So I had a choice between adding red mana or green mana or some combination of both. I chose to just add green mana since this is a creature-based deck. I think the green mode +4/+4 to a creature on that Singleton Obelisk is going to be more useful than just uncounterable burn to the face. So we'll see if that's right, we'll see if that's wrong, but that's why I went with, I basically took all the gates that I would have played and just added the Tri-Land, which is that gate plus green. So that's why I'm playing 3 Sandstep Citadels. Here we've got a Dimir Gate, which is morphed into an Opulent Palace since we have it. And here we have a Seaside Citadel, which is, it's an Azorius Guildgate, as far as the mana base is concerned. So we've got 8 tap lands out of 23 and 15 basics. I don't want to be too slow with the deck because there are, a lot of things going on here, but the mana requirements are tough, and we do have a lot of 2-drops, so we can get away with, turn 2 2-drop, and then tap land into another 2-drop, which means, generally we won't get to trigger the Mirror Smith right away, which is kind of sad. So that's another reason I didn't want to play too many tap lands, was, not missing Mirror Smith triggers. But I mean, considering we're playing 3 colors, I think I got to play at least 8. At least that's my sentiment. So I'm playing, as far as the basics go, I'm playing 3 and 3 and 9 islands. Maybe I shave an island, for a black or a white or something like that. Maybe I shave a tap land, I don't know. But right now, The sources are white is 3, 4, 7, 10, and I think I got black at 10 as well. Just 3, 4, 7. Yeah, black is at 10, and I think blue is at 14 if memory serves. So this is 3, 1, and 1. Yeah, so it's 14, 14, 10, 10 for blue, white, and black. So don't know if that's enough sources of each color. You know, gonna have to play around with it. Again, this is totally theoretical, based on very little experience with another build, and we're gonna see how it plays out. All right, hope you enjoyed the deck tech, the theoretical deck tech, and we'll see you for some gameplay very shortly.